Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the first in our new series of Making Melody to the Lord, interviews with musicians of Grace Lutheran Church. Our first interview is with Lynnn Nichols. So Lynn, we're glad you're here, and we begin with the first question is, how did you get started in church music?
Goodness, Pastor, I don't remember not having music, church music, and church in my life. Since I was a very young child, I've been singing. They used to have to tell me at the supper table to stop singing, eat your dinner. And some of my very earliest memories are being in church and being in children's choir, learning to sing Jesus Loves Me. And what came to mind right then is on Christmas Eve, the children's choir would always sing. And I remember our pastor coming around with a little box of chocolates for each of us in the choir. Oh. There were maybe 10 children, something like that. And that was a big deal for me because I love sweets, and chocolate specifically. So I think I might have been bribed a little bit. But
it always helps, chocolate.
It was a Grace Lutheran Church that I grew up in Connecticut. And I didn't realize till I was a little older how very fortunate I was, because it was full of my mother's side of the family. My mother actually grew up in Hartford, but her mother grew up in Middletown, and her mother, which is my grandmother, was one of 13 children. So in my Grace Lutheran Church that I grew up in were my mother's aunts and uncles and her first cousins. So I had great aunts and uncles and second cousins out the yazoo at the church, and they were often the ushers, they were the ladies doing the altar guild, they were teaching Sunday school. It was not a huge church, but it was absolutely full of the Schilke family.
So from the very beginning, when you were a child, you were a part of music and singing in the church.
Yes, absolutely. But I will tell you that as a child and as a youth and going through school and things like that, high school, it never occurred to me that I could be a musician. That was not considered work in our family, and work was something that you went to and you did and you didn't like. And so I really didn't come to being a musician until I was a professional, trained musician until much later. It wasn't until I was nearly 40 years old that I went back to college. In fact, I went to Blue Ridge Community College right here and earned an Associate of Fine Arts degree in music. And at that time, the director of music here was Michael Brannon, and he very much wanted me to go to Converse College. I didn't realize how much it was, but he recognized that I had a voice that should be trained. And he got Dr. Beverly Hay up here several times to do voice workshops with the choir. I don't know if you remember that or not. He managed always to get me to do some singing, and eventually I did go to Converse College and earned a Bachelor of Music degree at Converse. In fact, my junior year at Converse, and again, I was like 40 years old, my accompanist was not able to perform for my junior recital. And with about a week and a half worth of notice, Michael Brannon learned all the music and performed my junior recital with me. So he jumped right in. And I had wonderful response from our congregation here. There were probably 40 people from the congregation that came down. John and Jane Woodman, who were members then, provided the reception afterwards, which was lovely. And it was just a wonderful thing, my church family gathering around me like that. When I finished my bachelor's degree, I wasn't quite satisfied with where my voice was because it wasn't stable. I was still changing back and forth between things. And so I did stay another 2 years at Converse and earned a master's degree. Of course, I was just commuting from here in Hendersonville. And that was where I learned the music. I found, though, that by the time I was finished with my schooling, I was trained in the bel canto style of singing, which most of the operas are written in. It's the Italian style of singing where you have a very open throat, you use your whole body. And what I found was I wasn't really excited about opera. I never have liked the stories very much. Of course, the soprano always dies. But it just seemed kind of silly to me. So I was very glad to learn to focus more on church work and church music. And I do love the church music. It's wonderful music, and virtually every great musician has written church music. So I get to sing Mozart, I get to sing Bach, I get to sing Beethoven. A lot of times it's for the hymns, sometimes it's during the anthems, and I do sometimes sing solos, not only here but at other churches, and again I get to sing wonderful music. So I'm really extremely blessed to get to do that.
So when you came to Grace Lutheran Church in Hendersonville, obviously you joined the choir.
Yes.
And it was during that time. So you were singing with the choir for how many years before you actually started studying music seriously?
As long... I can only remember a few years that I didn't sing in a choir. When I lived down in Bessemer City, I sang with the church choir at a Lutheran church. I did not sing for a couple of years when we were first married. But when we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, I was a member of Redeemer Lutheran Church, which is the one that Palmer Clemmer went to when he left here. And I was in the choir there. Another wonderful experience I had in Charleston was I was a member of the Symphony Singers Guild. And so I sang with the symphony for 3 or 4 years. And we didn't have a very big choir at Redeemer Lutheran Church. There were only 6 of us, but 5 of us were in the Symphony Singers Guild. So it was a fine little choir. And that was a real pleasure. Again, being exposed to wonderful music. But yeah, when we moved up here, maybe for a few months I wasn't a member of the choir because we weren't here really full-time. We were traveling a lot then. We were semi-retired because we had sold the business in Charleston. We had a business, my husband Michael and I, where we sold ready-made curtains and bedspreads. And we were in business in Charleston for 8 years. We had 2 stores, and we eventually sold the business and moved here. And it was after that that I started going to school, after we did traveling for quite a while.
I love what you said about work being something that you're not supposed to enjoy, but music has become your work eventually. Has it ever talk about that transition from music, something that you do, to now music that you use as work?
I was trained when I was at Converse College to be a teacher. They require that of all the voice majors, realizing that there is not probably going to be sufficient employment in just singing. And I didn't think I would like teaching because I never thought I would like to be in a classroom, and I really didn't have private lessons except for when I was an adult. But what I found was that I really do enjoy teaching very much. It makes me really think hard about how to bring the best sound out of the students. One of my former teachers used to say, "You have to use my ear. You need a third ear because you can't really hear what you sound like." And it's absolutely true. We don't know what we sound like outside of our bodies. So I have to be able to make a lot of different sounds, like if I can go, oh, that's a good sound. But if I go, ah, it's probably too far forward. If I go, oh, it's probably too far back. If I go, ah, I need to be able to make those sounds to be able to tell the student how to change it. So it makes me really think about what I'm doing. And of course, the 2 main things about music is that you have to have the correct pitch, you have to have the correct rhythm. after that, it's just making it beautiful. So the other part that I really focus on is making sure that the body is used in a healthy way so that their student is not creating stress where it shouldn't be, so that they're breathing well, and just not creating bad habits. Standing up with your shoulders back a little bit so that your diaphragm can extend downward and things like that.
Having been on the receiving end of your voice lessons, lucky enough to have had a few voice lessons with you as my teacher, I know that you have quite an ear for all manners of strange sounds that students can produce, so I appreciate that. And I have learned so much from you, even in the few personal one-to-one lessons that you and I have had. I just love those moments. You are challenging. You do make, at least this student, you made this student figure out, how am I going to do that? I can't do that. And then you say, yes, you can, and you will, and I did. So thank you for that. Throughout your whole entire life with music and church music, who has inspired you? Who continues to inspire you?
I have to say that I don't look to a lot of individuals. I'm inspired by the readings in the Bible to be a better person, to be kindness and love, and to show joy, to show the gratitude. And I suppose the biggest inspiration is Christ. I'm looking right behind you and seeing the wonderful window right there. People-wise, I don't, for instance, look to famous stars or athletes or anything like that. But I have to say that three people that inspire me to be a better person are sitting right here in front of me, to be a better musician. Christine, to look at you and know how very dedicated you are, how extremely generous you are with your time, and just your commitment to be here at the church and work so hard. That is inspiring. Pastor Ken, your gentleness is absolutely wonderful. Your kindness to everyone. Of course you're kind too, Christina. I didn't mean to not use that. And you're so sharp too. I love that about you. But Pastor Ken, I always, and just, it's such a joy to be around you. You just bring joy. And Burton, you're an amazing musician, and yet your humility is just marvelous. I love it that you sign things, the emails you send to us and the music that you write in Christ's service. That says it all right there. And I'm just astounded what you do, both writing music and then writing plays and then leading as you do. So I've got three wonderful inspirations right here.
I remember about a year ago, I was supposed to sing something, a solo or something. Maybe it was an anthem. I don't know, or part of the liturgy. And you and I were sitting back there in the back pew, getting ready to process in with the choir. And you knew that I was nervous because I think you had worked with me a couple of weeks beforehand. And you wrote me a little note. And I was so inspired by this. And I get that you were inspired by your faith because the little note you wrote, do you remember this at all? You said, Christine, it's not about you. This song that you're going to sing is not about you. It's about loving Christ. Show your love for Christ. And I did, and I thought about that as I sang it, and I thank you for that. So your faith is just so strong. It's so inspiring.
And I've heard people say that your personality doesn't match your talent. That you're so humble, but yet your talent is so good you could be a real diva. So that's a great reputation to have the great talent and gift of singing, but a beautiful, humble spirit to go along with it. A real servant of Christ through music.
Serving is, yes, what I try to do. I had to work through that, again, when I was in college, primarily, to realize that it's not about me. I'm an instrument, and my job as the servant is to present the message to the best of my ability. And interpreting the message is important, too, so that has made me be someone that studies the Bible pretty often. I'm not in Bible studies here usually, but it's a daily routine for me to spend time with the Bible and to ponder what it's saying and correlate what I'm reading with other things and try to make it fit with what's going on in my life. So.
Well, I have some questions about music specifically, and I had asked you earlier, but what is your favorite hymn? And I've got to admit to sing. I know they're all our favorite hymns, but what is your favorite hymn to sing?
I really love Earth and All Stars. That one, it's all about praise, and it talks about so many different parts of the world praising the Lord, because I think that's my job. And, you know, the trees rustle in praise, and the birds sing in praise, and the water falls down the mountain in praise. But it talks about the loud boiling test tubes. That just cracks me up. And I think it's true. It also, and a long time ago, I worked in a chemistry lab, so I can really relate to that. And it also has building materials in there, too. And I worked for a structural steel company for quite a long time, too. So that also, you know, I can relate to that. But it just comes down to, I, too, will praise thee with a new song. So shall we sing that, Burton?
I think we should. We will add that this is a hymn by a Lutheran composer, David Johnson, and I love, the classrooms and labs, the engines and steel, and the trumpet and pipes.
And it talks about harps in there, too.
Harps, okay.
Harp, flute, and lyre.
Mm-hmm. Okay, should we do two verses?
Sure.
You want to do one, and you want to do the classrooms and labs?
No, I think engines and... Wait a minute, which one? How about 1 and 2?
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Okay. Just a great tune and a great text. And we sing it here once a year.
It's a happy song.
But a very happy song.
I like that. And praise is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And I love the areas like we don't sing about test tubes and labs very often.
That's right.
In fact, I don't think we ever sing about them.
Harps
But
come in pretty often. But
harps and trumpets do come in pipes, yeah, but test tubes and labs and snowstorms and just all wonderful.
it is.
Let me ask you about liturgy. Do you have...
You know, I grew up, well, you wouldn't know, but I grew up in a Missouri Synod church, and I still sing some of that liturgy. It's still ingrained in me, and it's often as a prayer that I use that. And I love, goodness, a lot of the liturgy that we use now, too. And I especially like the Holy Evening Prayer. I think that was written by Marty Haugen. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And he wrote that other Kyrie that I like so much, which is so beautiful. It's so tuneful. But in the Holy Evening Prayer, I get to sing the Magnificat pretty often. And it's such a wonderful piece. And the Annunciation, where the angel comes, I just think it's such a marvelous story, and I get to have three voices in it, too. I get to be the narrator, I get to be the angel, and then I get to be Mary. And so I really enjoy those pieces.
I didn't know Holy Evening Prayer until I came here almost 11 years ago. And I was told the congregation really likes this. We use it during Advent, and it wasn't long before I was absolutely in love with it. And we do it probably Advent and Lynn. Sometimes we will do something a little different. There was a really beautiful setting of evening prayer that was written a few years ago, and I introduced that to the congregation, and we used it, and I thought, this is just beautiful. And they went, it's beautiful. Can we do the whole evening prayer?
There's something comforting about it, though.
There it is.
It's so tuneful, and of course we've done it long enough that there's not big surprises coming. And I think that if we're going to have a prayerful time together, that is quite appropriate, not having to learn new things all the time. So even though it is something we've used for quite a while,
it is nice
there's a
up here
place.
when I'm playing it, because if the congregation is full, if it's half full, if it's just a handful of people, I will hear singing, and I'll know people are singing and enjoying it. And you mentioned the Annunciation. That is my favorite part of the whole piece. We sung through the psalmody and the opening. There's been some scripture. Sometimes there's a sermon. Sometimes some sermons are longer than others.
Hey, be careful.
And
Yes, I felt that.
I was kidding. I think the way the Annunciation starts, I think just to sit down and play is so beautiful. It's just so cool, and I love it. There is a second part, once we get on the second page, is an alto part. And I believe Christine will sing that for us, and then we'll do a verse of the Magnificat.
An angel went from God to a town called Nazareth, to a woman whose name was Mary. The angel said to her, rejoice, O highly favored, for God is with you. You shall bear a child, and his name shall be Jesus, the chosen one of God Most High. And Mary said, I am the servant of my God. I live to do your will. My soul proclaims your gracious, O God, and my spirit rejoices in you. You have walked with love and your servant here, and blessed me all my life through.
it goes on. And it's so beautiful. One more type of music. What is your favorite solo you have sung? I have accompanied more solos with you singing than I even could count. I mean, and it's such a joy to accompany you. Do you have one that's a particular favorite that we could do?
I have a lot of particular favorites, but the one for today is Panis Angelicus by César Franck. I do love to sing the Mozart Alleluia, and I just have that high C still, so we'll do that another time.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and I love the stuff from Messiah, too, so I'm glad that sometimes we get to do that. But this is beautiful, and anything Mozart. So. But today, Panis Angelicus.
That was so beautiful. Just kind of makes you feel like you're in heaven, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, that was my very first solo when I was a freshman in college at Florida State. When I was taking voice lessons, and it sounded just like that. No, not at all. It's so beautiful.
You have a perfectly lovely voice. So I'm glad that you continue to sing and lead like you do.
See, that's being recorded, right?
It is being recorded.
That's on tape. So
It
so
is
you
on
mentioned the high C with Mozart.
Mhm.
You have an incredible range. I noticed that our stained glass windows in here, you've sung in here many times, have not broken yet. Have you ever broken any?
I have not. Apparently, it takes the correct thickness of glass and the correct pitch. But I have not broken anything except for like walking into it. So,
What is your range? I know you can sing with the tenors in the choir. Your range is low also. What is your range?
I can middle C. I can touch the C below that, and sometimes the B below that. So, but nobody really wants to hear me down there. And then for above middle C, I've got 2 octaves and a note. So I've got about, I don't know, 3.5 octaves, 4 octaves.
Play that one, Burton. 2 octaves and a note up there.
And then the C below middle C. Yeah, that's about what I have.
That's awesome.
That is amazing. But you also play. We've seen you play the harp, and we've seen you play the recorder. We're going to be lucky enough tonight to hear you play the harp. How did all that come about with the harp stuff?
I've always thought harp music was beautiful, absolutely wonderful. And you didn't see it very much, or I didn't see it very much, except for like in orchestras when I was a kid. And I'm talking about like on television. I never went to a live concert. And when I was maybe 22 years old, something like that, living in Gastonia, my husband and I got tickets to the community concert series where guest artists would come to the local high school and perform, and that would happen about once a month. And that particular year, a harpist named Emily Mitchell came, and she brought not only the great big gold concert grand harp that's got the pedals on it, that's the pedals change the pitch, but she also brought the smaller harp like I play. And you can call the smaller harp that I play that does not have the pedals, you can call it a folk harp or an Irish harp or a Celtic harp or a lever, L-E-V-E-R harp, because it has levers on it to change the pitches. And it has, the lever harp has about half the range as the big concert grand harp. But anyway, I listened to Emily Mitchell play, and it was so glorious. And she sang some when she was playing the Celtic harp, not when she was playing the big concert grand one. And I thought, oh, it would be so fabulous to be able to do that. And again, I didn't do anything about it for a long time. This was before internet. This was before it was easy to find things. I mean, now I can ask my phone anything and it knows it. I can ask my phone to who are the best harp manufacturers in the country, and it'll list 6 right there. You know, where do I get harp music? In seconds, it's there. And it was not that way then. And I had not had any education in music at that time, so I didn't know music journals or anything like that. And anyway, I didn't follow through with it like maybe I could have if I'd thought about it. But anyway, when I graduated as a Master of Music, I decided I was going to treat myself to a harp. And at that time, there was a company in Black Mountain. I think they've moved. The name will come to me after a while. But anyway, they make mountain dulcimers and hammer dulcimers. And they had a few harps in stock. And I went up there and I bought a harp. And then, God bless my brother-in-law, Johnny, he said, I'm so happy for you to have graduated college. Let me make that a gift for you. He paid off my credit card. I couldn't believe it. That was an incredibly generous gift. People have been extremely generous with me, not only financially, but also with their time, like Michael Brandon I was mentioning earlier. But anyway, that was a fabulous gift. And I worked at it for a little while, but I have to admit I let it sit for an awful long time. If you've been around me, Christine, you know that I play a little bit on the piano with my right hand. My left hand, it just has a mind of its own. And I really do think they passed me through the piano requirements at college out of pity, because I was there all the time and I was always practicing. So anyway, I couldn't get the harp to quite work like I wanted it to for a long time. And I let it sit for several years, and I finally went back to it and said, I am going to practice an hour a day if it kills me. So I made myself sit down for an hour a day, like I used to do with the piano. And I've got my left hand where it'll do enough to do the background stuff, which is all it really needs to do. And I'll never be a fabulous harper like Emily Mitchell. I can make some pretty sounds, and I've learned. It was hard. It's taken me about 2 years to learn to sing with the harp, because I work with students sometimes that are trying to play an instrument and sing at the same time. You have to have one of those things be on autopilot. Either your voice has to know where it's going so well and you know the words so well, or you have to have your fingers know what they're doing so well that you don't have to think about them to be able to do the two things at once, because you really cannot think about two things at once. And that's a problem that a lot of musicians have. So it's taken me a couple of years to learn to sing with the harp. It was wonderful when Margie Capel was here, too, because she's a fabulous musician, and I knew that she played the recorder, and she has several of them. And, of course, she's a wonderful singer, too. And so probably 6 or 7 years ago now, I said to her, I've just about got enough in my harp ability to us play together. You want to try? And so we worked together every Sunday after church for about an hour and came up with arrangements and just had a good time with it. It was very creative, and I enjoyed that very much. I'm not much of a recorder player. I'm just not. I'm not gifted there. I'm extremely happy to be gifted with being able to sing and to do enough harping to keep me satisfied, and that I don't have the other gifts. That's okay. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yes. It does fill us up with your voice and your harp. So, I agree with you. You are so gifted in those realms. I mean, you don't need anything else. You can fill a couple of cathedrals with that music. And you're going to play for us.
I would love to. I would love to. I'm going to play, I'm not going to play a lot of Blessed Assurance, but I'm going to accompany me singing Blessed Assurance. That's one of my favorite hymns, too.
That was so beautiful. I understand you're doing something new with the harp. Tell us about that.
I am working now on a therapeutic Harp program. It's a home study program where you go at your own rate. It's with the teaching company Harp for Healing. And you can use other instruments. For instance, people sometimes use a flute or a Native American flute or a guitar. But it is for therapeutic harping. This is not music therapy. Music therapy is where you have a 4-year degree and you go in and you work with a physician to help affect a cure for a patient. And you've got specific goals that you're meant to reach, and it is interactive between the patient and the musician. Therapeutic harping is not that, and therapeutic music is not there. It's a fairly new field. It's only about 15 or 20 years old. And what it is meant to do is to help stabilize patients and to improve the atmosphere of the place where they are, whether it's in a room to lighten their feelings. It will also help stabilize blood pressure. You can get heartbeat to reduce. It's a very interesting field. I've only been working on the program for about 3 months now. But the other thing that I decided to do, foolish me, was to learn to play a different type of harp so that it would be an easier harp to carry around. So I'm playing now a double-strung harp. It has 2 rows of strings, one on the left side for the left hand and one on the right side for the right hand. And it's only 22 strings on each side, which makes it a much smaller harp so that it's easy to carry from room to room as you would go around in a facility or into a patient's home if you were working with them there. A long time ago, at least 10 years ago now, I was a volunteer with the hospice down here at Elizabeth House. And I also had a couple patients that I saw in facilities. But while I was at Elizabeth House, I told them that I'm a singer and that if they wanted me to go in and sing to patients, I would do that. And it was a very moving experience to see the patients, the way they would change when I would sing. Of course, I wouldn't use my big opera voice, you know. I used my little sing-a-lullaby voice. And so often I wouldn't have warning about it, so I would just be singing what hymns I knew from memory or sometimes folk tunes or something like that, whatever I could come up with. But I have had the desire to do more healing work. And that's what Harp for Healing is for, and therapeutic harping in general. There is something fabulous about the resonance of the harp, and it's so very calming and soothing that it really does change the attitude and atmosphere of an area. So it's another thing I'm working toward.
Like a wonderful new area of ministry for you.
Thank you, Pastor.
It is amazing. I didn't know that. Did you know that, Bird? Did you know she was doing that?
I did not know that.
Wow.
Woman of many,
Amazing.
you didn't know I went swimming every day, did you, either?
I did not know that either.
Michael and I recently moved down to Rutherfordton from Hendersonville. So I'm up here usually a couple times a week, mostly for church stuff, but to do a little teaching. And we were able to get a house on a lake. So I love being in the lake. It's beautiful, clear water, no gasoline engines on the lake. It's a small lake. But I'm a New Englander to start with, cold water doesn't bother me too bad. So I was in the water the first day of spring. And I was in the water last November, too. So I'm trying to work up to being in the water every day, but we'll see. Right now it's easy because of the bath water, you know. Sorry, I got off track a little bit.
Yeah, fine. Lynn, you had talked a little bit earlier about your students. We know you have a studio. What do you like most about teaching?
I like seeing my students improve. I love seeing it when that light bulb goes off. And just when they get good results. My goal has always been to meet someone where they are and help them improve. I was very grateful, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, to be called to teach class voice at Blue Ridge Community College, where I took classes. I was in the same room. I was taking classes 10 years before. There I was teaching in the room. But to get to work with a whole group of students like that was wonderful. And to help teach them how to encourage each other was a pleasure too. But just having people improve and watching them get better. Every year I would have a can't think of the right word, where people perform in front of each other, a recital for the students. Burton has played for several of the recitals. Some of them have been here, and I, of course, had them at Blue Ridge, too. And to see the change for a few months, sometimes over the course of years. I've had some students sometimes for years at a time. But to see the change is just wonderful.
That's some very good students.
And I've had some wonderful students, yes.
And some challenging students.
Challenging is good. I like challenging. And you don't give yourself enough credit for what you came in with.
Lynn, what do you find challenging as a teacher?
Knowing where to start sometimes, because you can only work on one thing at a time. If you try to work on too many things, then it gets confusing for the student. They don't know what to focus on. It's like I was talking about before with playing the harp and trying to sing at the same time. You can only really focus on one thing at a time. So what is the biggest thing that needs to be worked on is the first challenge. And then how do I work on that? And sometimes I don't get it immediately. Sometimes I go home and think about it, and it'll come to me in the car or when I'm doing something else, and I'll realize, oh, I could do this type of exercise to make that work out. Because sometimes it's not something you've come across before, even though I've been teaching for quite a while now.
You know, that made me think of when you work with us at choir rehearsal on Wednesday nights, you warm us up. And I don't know if you know this, Pastor, but she teaches us. She actually gives us choir members a mini voice lesson every Wednesday night while she's warming us up. It's like for free. We get to go to choir rehearsal and then we get this voice lesson from this magnificent singer. What do you think of, Lynn, when you're warming us up? Because your lessons every Wednesday night, they're not the same. They're different. What's going through your mind when you're thinking, okay, now I've got to teach these singers to do this with the voice in their body?
When I usually start with the same type of warm-up. We go up 5 steps, we come back down 5 steps, and I have us sing the different vowels, because the vowels are open. And I'm listening really hard to hear what's going on in the choir. If I'm hearing things that are really closed and tight, then I stop and say, okay, let's open up. And I'm afraid to hear a lot of the same things over and over again, which is just like it was in voice lessons. I heard the same things over and over again. You know, loosen the jaw muscles, let your jaw drop. Let there be space for the sound to come out. Let there be a finger's width of space between your teeth. Nice tool, handy right there, so that the sound can come out. So I'm listening really hard, and I'm looking around to see what's happening, too. And sometimes I'll hear, for instance, that one section is a lot louder than another section. So I'll say, okay, now let's listen a little closer to each other. Sometimes in the week before, when we're practicing the piece for the coming week, I'll notice that there's a problem, especially with pronunciation. And so I will think of an exercise that we might use to correct, to make the pronunciation better when we're singing, especially if it's Latin. That one gets me. I got to work on the R's a little bit more, the final R's, and in the middle of the words. Bert knows exactly what I'm saying. And then I work on dynamics too, and trying to keep us all balanced when we increase the dynamic level, loudness and softness to come back down at the same rate we went up, unless the music calls for something different. So it just depends on what the music that's coming up has in it, but also what I hear the biggest problem for the choir is. Sometimes it's pitch. Sometimes it's, we're a little under pitch, and that's not going to fly, especially if we're going to sing something a cappella. We're going to, by the time we're down, through that verse, we'll be a half step down or a whole step down, and Burton we won't match when we come back together. So I hope that answered your question. Oh, but I did want to say that when I am talking to the choir, I try really hard to make sure that everybody understands not only what the goal is, but why, and how it should feel in your body. I know I've had the choir take their fingers and run it down the side of the jaw to pull it down like that so you can feel where it would be when it's open. And singing is very physical. People don't realize that it's really from your stance all the way up through your entire body. And so making sure that the choir breathes well is important. You can't breathe without breath. I mean,
It's
you
a
can't
lot
sing
of
without
fun. Those segments in the choir rehearsal. It's a lot of fun with you learning to sing and put your body in a better place, and just the way you produce sound and vowels and consonants and pronunciation. It's a lot of fun. Thank you for doing that.
I'm glad that you can hear it as fun and not here's this demanding person, with an agenda for us, which I do have an agenda. I want it to be a beautiful sound so that when we sing our praises, that it's not in any way distracting. It's the beautiful. It's the best we can do.
Well, very good. Thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing with us your story, your journey, for singing and playing for us. A wonderful evening to get to know more about you and sharing with us your wonderful talents.
It's a pleasure, Pastor Ken, and I am delighted and humbled to be here. Thank you for asking me. And again, I'm with three of my favorite people, so life is good.
Life is good. Yeah. Well, let's close our time together with a prayer. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the wonderful gift of music, ways that we can bring to you the fullness of our praise, expressions of our faith, and bringing you the glory that you deserve. Thank you for this wonderful gift, and thank you for Lynn, your faithful servant, who shares with us the talents you have given to her, so that together we can bring you glory and know your goodness in our lives. What an abundant gift you give to us in music and through your faithful and humble servant, Lynn. So thank you, and pray that each one of us, that your Spirit guides us and blesses us, that each in our own way, our lives are lived to bring you glory. We pray this in the name of Jesus, our Savior and Lord. Amen.